A crazy thing happened last winter. It was right after my roommate Jenna moved in. The rent was affordable and I loved it. The house was close to campus. It was a little old and cozy. The floors creaked, and there was a big oak tree out front. One night, a big snowstorm hit our town. It was the kind of snow that makes you want to curl up with a hot drink before you leave the house. So that's exactly what I did, and I was trying to warm up while watching some shows on Netflix when there was a knock on the door. Who would be outside in this weather? I opened the door and there was a man standing on the porch shivering from the cold. He looked to be in his 30s and had a worried look on his face. He said his car was stuck in the snow a block away and asked if he could borrow my phone to call a tow truck. I'm not usually a skeptical person, but something about the way he looked at me bothered me. It was like he wasn't making eye contact or he seemed a little too desperate. But it was cold outside and I thought it could happen to anyone. So I lent him my cell phone and held the door open while he made a call. He thanked me awkwardly, gave me back my cell phone, and went back into the storm. I locked the door and returned to the couch, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Maybe it was the fact that I was home alone for the first time that made me paranoid, or maybe it was the howling of the wind that made everything seem so ominous. That evening, as the storm intensified, there was a loud knock on the front door. It was so loud that the whole house shook. I looked out the window and thought it might have been the man from earlier or a fallen tree branch. But there was no one there, just an empty street, the snow swirling in the light of the street lamps. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind or children playing pranks, but inside I couldn't help feeling fear. The house was different now. The silence was heavy, and every little sound made me jump. This was the beginning of it all. A strange man opened the door in the middle of a snowstorm, and my cozy little house became a place where I no longer felt completely safe. In the days following the snowstorm and the strange visitor, my insecurity grew. I kept thinking about the man who knocked on my door, his worried demeanor, and the pounding that evening. Questions kept running through my mind. Who was he really? And was he the one who came back to knock on my door? I mentioned it to some neighbors, but none of them had seen anything unusual during the storm. They said the wind might have hit the house with something, but I couldn't help feeling that there was something more. There were traces of a stranger's visit. I could hear the creaks and groans that are normal in an old house, but they were louder and more pronounced. At night, I lay in bed and listened to the sounds of the house. A few nights later, I was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. With my heart pounding, I ran downstairs and found a broken window pane in the living room. A cold wind and snow had come in and covered the floor with a thin white layer. I looked around to see if a stone or something else had broken, but there was nothing. Just broken glass and an empty sky that seemed to howl in the winter night. I called the police and they came to look around. They said it could have been a tree branch or something, but to keep their eyes open. They didn't mention the man in the blizzard. Without evidence, I thought they would think I was paranoid. The next day, I had the windows fixed, but the sense of security I once felt in this house was gone. Every stranger on the street became suspicious. Every unexpected sound a potential threat. I was trapped in a cycle of anxiety, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at shadows. And so I was alone in the house I once loved, now spending sleepless nights and anxious days. A stranger's visit opened a door of fear, and I could not close it. As the days passed, the tension in the house continued to grow. I was constantly on edge and jumped every time I heard a noise. The broken window made me feel vulnerable, and the stranger's visit haunted me like a bad dream. One night, I was trying to distract myself with the TV when I heard a noise upstairs, a slow sound like footsteps. My first thought was that it was the sound of the house sinking, but the rhythm of the footsteps was very steady, very deliberate. I gathered my courage and went upstairs, holding the stick I had grabbed for safety. The hallway was dark, and the only light was the moonlight streaming through the window. Footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. I listened hesitantly. checking each room, turning on the lights, and quickly looking for signs of intrusion. But nothing seemed out of place and no one was hiding in the shadows. My relief was short-lived, however, and the feeling that I was not alone grew deeper. The technician who came to install the system was friendly and talkative, which lightened the mood in the house a little. But even after he left and the system was in place, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. This wasn't the only time I heard footsteps. Similar incidents continued on the following nights. I heard noises, I checked the house, and found nothing. Sounds of no origin echoed off the walls, as if the house itself was playing tricks on me. Sleep was no longer possible. I stayed awake for hours, straining my ears for unfamiliar sounds. The once cozy solitude of the house had become a constant source of anxiety. I missed Jenna, my old roommate, and the security of having someone with me. So I was trapped in a house that felt like a trap, and the tension was mounting every day. The line between reality and my nerves blurred, and I was in a constant state of anxiety. The culmination of these unsettling events occurred on one unforgettable night. The security alarm went off, and I woke up with my heart pounding. I jumped out of bed and checked the security panel. It showed a break-in through the back door. I grabbed my cell phone to call the police, but before I could dial, I heard the back door close. I went downstairs with a baseball bat and prepared for the worst. When he reached the kitchen, the back door was wide open and the cold night air was pouring in. Gathering my courage, I looked outside and saw footprints in the fresh snow, leaving the house and disappearing into the darkness. The police soon arrived and searched the area, but no one was found. The police said it could have been an attempted burglary, and the intruder could have been startled by the alarm. The police assured me that they would increase patrols in the neighborhood and advised me to stay with friends and family if possible. After they left, I sat in the living room, the adrenaline slowly fading, and I was left with a deep sense of unease. Footsteps, voices, the feeling of being watched. Everything seemed to be connected, but there were no answers, only more questions. The next day, I decided to stay at a friend's house for a while. I packed a few essentials and took one last look around the house. It was a place I once called home, but now I felt tainted with memories I wanted to forget. I did not know who the stranger at the door was, or if he had anything to do with the events that followed. The man's identity and intentions remained a mystery to me. Even after I moved out, the experience stayed with me and reminded me of the fear and vulnerability I felt. The house on the quiet street, with its creaking floorboards and old oak tree, stood as a silent witness to that winter's anxiety. Even though I had moved out, part of me always wondered what secrets the house held and if anyone heard the whispers at night. I live in New Delhi, India. I will describe the layout of my house later, which is a 4-bedroom house with a living room kitchen and a private terrace. Around 2 a.m. I was surfing the internet. When I looked out of my bedroom window, I saw nothing, so I started using my cell phone again, and 5 minutes later I heard the sound of glass breaking again, right above me, so I decided to go to the terrace to find out what was happening. When I almost reached the terrace, I heard people talking and laughing. I opened the terrace door a little and saw 3 men drinking beer on the terrace. I shouted, I know it was childish of me to react like that instead of hiding, but I couldn't understand why these people were in my house. Now they knew someone was in the house. One of them took out a big knife and started running towards me. I ran down the stairs and locked myself in my room, and they started banging very hard on the door. At one point I thought they were going to break the door down, and then one of them said in a very frightening voice, "Now come out and let me ease your pain." I got scared and called the police immediately. It took 15 minutes for the police to arrive. Fortunately, the men were still inside my bedroom door. The police heard all the commotion, forced their way in, and managed to catch the crazy men. Those men did not explain how they got into my terrace. I still don't know how or why those men did it. I know they went to jail, but that's all I know. I don't know anything else about what happened to them, but I hope they rot in jail for a long time and get what they really deserve.